Welcome to the Afghanistan Project podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and I am rejoined today by Shawn VanDiver and Kate Kovarovic. We are going to be talking about all of the things that have happened since our last episode when everything that we had, that Shawn and Kate had said kind of spun over and did a 360 at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday. Shawn, I want you to pick up, for anybody, let's just do these real brief introductions again. If you don't know him, Shawn VanDiver is founder and president of the Afghan Evac Coalition, which is an umbrella of multiple volunteers and professionals across the government and private sector who aim to fulfill the promises that the U.S. made to its allies. Kate Kovarovic was the director of resilience programming for the Afghan Evac Coalition and a general badass. So, I will let you guys pick it up with all of the things that have happened in the last, week and a half since you were last here and the world spun on its head.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us back today. When last we chatted, the current state was there were no refugee arrivals coming, but SIVs were going to be fine, be able to do their flights, be able to go through the platforms, be able to come here. And you may still be hearing that SIV is unaffected, but that is simply not true. Anybody who's saying that doesn't understand the process. And what it looks like is the things that are working are initial application, right? So you can apply for SIV. You can go through Chief of Mission processing. So MVC will package up your complete application, send it over to the Afghan SIV unit, in Washington, D.C. to review for Chief of Mission approval. They'll validate your employment, they'll validate your letter of recommendation, your letter writer, make sure you are who you say you are. Then you can apply for a visa, and you can sit for a visa interview, and you can come to the United States, you can get a visa foil in your passport. But all of the enabling services around that are what has stopped. So we're saying it's a de facto pause. And the reality is there are no flights leaving Kabul. There are no flights leaving the intermediate processing sites. And there's nobody to catch you when you get here if you're an SIV. So what is directly impacted because of the foreign aid pause that went out on 8:30 p.m. on Friday night, right after we chatted, it stopped reception and placement services. And it's not as simple as just arriving here, right? Even if you have community to catch you, the resettlement agencies provide job placement. They help you get housing. They help you get your kids enrolled in school, cultural acclimation. There's a lot of jobs, right? This is the other thing that people haven't been talking about is thousands of SIVs lost their jobs because they were giving back to people coming after them by working for those resettlement agencies. Yes. So the way I like to describe it is that Secretary Rubio and President Trump put a cap on the end of the hose, the steel reinforced hose that we had created throughout the last administration to honor the promise for our allies, right? We had a lot of complaints back in August of 2021 that people weren't getting out fast enough, that we were betraying our allies. And myself, Kate, thousands of other people worked with government to build this pipeline, and they put a cap on it with this foreign aid pause. The other thing that it impacted was the loans that SIVs get to get their flights from intermediate processing stage places or other places around the world. They get a flight to come here, where then the resettlement agencies catch them.
I just the lawyer in me wants to catch you on using that phrase because I think in the immigration world right now, hearing the phrase catch you might be a little bit confusing for people. We're not saying they're going to bust you for being in the United States. We're saying that when you arrive
catch like
here,
a warm hug.
Yes. Okay. I like that. I really like that. Yeah. But just if you are an immigrant and you are watching this, it's our way of saying, when you arrive at a new place, there's usually resettlement services that we like to offer, and that's what Shawn is referring to.
And it looks like welcome signs at the airport and people getting you in your car, taking to your new home or a hotel where you have a week's worth of groceries, and then getting those intensive support services to make sure that people can get on their feet, right? We promised people an American dream, and this is how it starts. by a soft landing. Now, SIVs can still arrive. In fact, there's a lot of folks among us who are raising money to get folks here. But there's nothing on the other side, or there's very little on the other side. So there is talk of like Afghan evac may start raising money to provide $10,000 micro grants per family, which is something we did before. We did $5,000 micro grants in the early days. We've got to hammer all of that out and make sure that we can do that. The scale is enormous. Right now, there are 360 families who need to travel from the intermediate processing sites. So we're trying to solve for that first. Government, our friends and colleagues in government are feeling the same way that we are. They're not getting any information. Nobody's telling them anything. And they're really worried about the people on those sites, right? They're really worried about the people in our care. We don't know what's going to happen to them. And like in my worst fears, they're talking about setting up Gitmo to take migrants. In my worst fears, I don't even want to speak that into existence.
It is happening. They have already started to take the steps to convert that into what they are referring to as an immigration detention facility.
Yeah. So what has happened? Foreign aid pause stopped all of that, which essentially means that they can't fly people from Kabul if there's no services on the platforms to support it. Because it wasn't just the flight loans; it's the psychosocial services on the platforms. It's the children and like the educational development stuff. It's
That's the part people are really
They're
missing.
going to run out of tampons and diapers and
Yes.
all sorts of stuff soon. And there's a lot of people that are doing what they can to bend over backwards to make sure that it fits within the waiver that President or that Secretary Rubio signed. But the reality is there's not a lot of latitude that people have, and when they start doing these things, whereas the last administration, creativity was encouraged. There was an executive order in place that President Trump wiped out, which essentially said, do everything you can to solve problems for increasing the flow of our wartime allies into the country. That was rescinded, and now people can't be creative. In fact, they get accused of being part of the deep state if they get creative to help our wartime allies, including family of U.S. military. It's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard.
That's just Shawn being really casual. I think I want to sort of pile on what he's saying a little bit, though, because when we had filmed our last episode, Shawn and I were kind of butting heads a little bit about, is this going to affect SIVs? And the only reason why I felt so sure that it was going to is because what we're seeing right now is a lot of shock and awe, right? Like they are coming out with a lot of very broad policy changes, and they're doing that for a reason. So no, they haven't targeted SIVs specifically, right? So I guess that could give people a little glimmer of hope, but it has fallen under these like very vast, very like, it's not specific. They're going after immigration, and anything that falls under immigration is going to be affected by that. So I think Shawn did a really good job. I just want to sort of like add a little bit more context to what it means when aid and when these programs, these support services are really paused for people. So Shawn said, you know, like the people who are trying to come over here, like they're going to miss access to basic necessities. So it's things like, yes, if you need hygiene products, diapers, clothing. What we're missing in saying it that clearly is like the human element of what it means to be a mother who is traveling by herself with children, and you cannot have access to diapers. And I think
we had to create a diaper underground railroad.
Yeah, and there is such confusion about like what people should and shouldn't have access to, that I think what we're seeing is from the people who are forced to implement these policies, they're taking a very strong approach and saying, we cannot give you anything. So you can be the crying mother who is standing there with your 6-month-old infant, unable to access diapers. People have been having trouble accessing formula. So this is not just a matter of like getting people from A to B. This is a matter of like basic survival and human dignity. Because can you imagine how it feels to be told that you're going to be allowed access to a country that's going to take care of you, and then to find out when you get there that we will not offer you any kind of support. So when he talks about like essential goods and services, it is down to like the very basic necessities that people need. One of the other things, though, that I do want to also highlight is the lack of access to education, right? So we talk so much about what is happening in Afghanistan. It is one of the most heartbreaking, I think, effects of what the Taliban has really implemented is that children do not have access to meaningful education at this point. So a lot of these programs will offer something to supplement the gap for children. So we had hundreds of children who were enrolled in English classes, and now they can't even access that. So it's not even like we're not willing to teach you, but we're not willing to teach you an essential skill for you to survive when you are moved to your new home. So it's like it's a very broad impact with things like this. And, you know, Shawn, I welcome you to talk about, I think you were talking about protection services have also been halted.
Oh, yeah.
Before you do that, can I just add one thing about Camp El Salia, right? Where people who are in places like Camp El Salia, they don't want to be there. They're not there as like a sweet little, you know, go-between spot for a weekend while they get processed. This is not Uniting for Ukraine that put people through a super fast process and pushed them right up into the border. This is not that. These are people who sometimes have been stuck there for months at a time and don't know why they are being...
There's some people who have been there for years.
Years.
Oh, I believe it.
But a very small number, but still.
Sure, that's, I mean, and that's because you can't, what are you supposed to do? You know, you're in this liminal phase where you can't do anything. They don't want to be there. They don't want to have to get their diapers from, you know, like none of this should have been happening. But the fact that now they are in this position where those things that were kind of just like a survival mechanism while they just waited and waited and waited are being taken away from them is just, I just want people, because I think that there is a misperception in all of this, that these are just Afghans who are so lucky to be. I don't want to ever portray that they're just so lucky to be in this position. They're not that.
There's a couple pieces to this that I want to cover, right? We talked about, Kate, you just talked about education. Mm-hmm. You're talking about girls in Afghanistan and girls on these platforms, right? Yeah. So that's important, right? There's a couple there's some folks out there that are spinning this tale that there's $40 million a week going to the Taliban. That is nonsense. That there's $50 million in condoms going to Gaza. That is nonsense. It's bullshit. Not a single condom was sent to the Middle East. Like, it's just not real. It's conflated numbers from aid packages that people are seeing on line items, and they're coming up with clever communications tricks. So don't let people bullshit you.
Well, actually, too, Shawn, like, let's consider the fact that, like, what Rubio has done is withdrawn a lot of aid that had historically been going to the Taliban. So I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they think, well, that's great. We're not supporting, you know, a known terrorist organization. There are security implications for innocent Afghans when things like this happen. Yeah. So I want to be cautious about like what stories I share, but I also want people to really understand that like one of the things that's been happening is now we're seeing a lot of infighting with the Taliban, because suddenly they're thinking, well, is this going to be the winning side, or are we going to get in trouble now because the U.S. is coming out really strong about what's happening? So now you're seeing a lot of infighting. And one of the things that's happening is that you've got some of the senior level Talibs who are watching border points of entry and exit, and they are trying to stop lower level Talibs who are trying to leave. And what you are seeing is that now those people who are wanting to leave are trying to turn over innocent Afghans, including people who worked and served with our military, as their way of being able to leave. So when we talk about the risk of being hunted by the Taliban, it hasn't actually gotten better because we withdrew our aid. We have put them in a situation where they feel like humans are bargaining chips for their own safety. So the situation in Afghanistan has not gotten any better. It's certainly not for the allies who are still in hiding 3.5 years later.
So, and I think I want to step back a little bit here and make a couple points, right? One, the last episode we talked a lot about the U.S. RAP executive order. This one we're talking a lot about the foreign aid executive order. Mm-hmm. Both of these executive orders are having an extraordinary impact on our wartime allies, among which the U.S. RAP executive order still has 3,000 family members of more than 200 active duty service members stranded. 200 of those family members are stuck in Camp Asalia. I've been to Camp Asalia 3 times. It's remarkable what they've done there. The education services, we got to cut a ribbon on the massive education complex because there were so many kids there. That thing is just shut down now. Like, all of these people are stranded in the desert with nothing to do because we cut off foreign aid, and they seem to be very specifically cutting around the Afghan population. So, if you were somebody who was up on TV in August of 2021 demanding Joe Biden's resignation or Tony Blinken's resignation or any of these other people, where the fuck you at, man? Get out there, make your voice heard, just like the rest of us. I don't want to hear how you care about Afghans unless you're fucking doing something here. And it's hard. Look, it's hard to walk into the president and tell him he's wrong. I know, I fucking did it. And I came and told you all about it. We need to see that happen.
Yeah, it's necessary. Like,
don't tell me about honor, courage, and commitment. Don't tell me about your core values. Where the fuck you at for these Afghans?
and I think too, like Beth, going back to your point too, you were talking about, you know, how people sometimes confuse what places like CAS are or CAS, or whatever you call it. So one of the families that I had worked with had a medically fragile 7-year-old. She had one of the most debilitating medical conditions that I have dealt with since I've been working with Afghans. And she was there, and they do offer medical services, including for medically fragile cases. But they're not prepared to deal with things beyond just the ordinary, right? So this girl, it was classified by the State Department as a skin condition. Really what it is like she's covered in like welts that can be the size of your hand. She's got webbing on her hands and feet, so she can't walk or hold a pencil normally. It has affected her vision, and it has started to eat away at like her stomach organs so that she can't process food. So even though there was medical care at places like CAS originally, they were not prepared to deal with cases like this. So what was happening was she would have to change her bandages. It took about 5 hours every day. And they could not even provide a sterile environment for her to do that. They allowed her access to a bathtub so that she had access to water, but is it necessarily the cleanest water when you're dealing with somebody who's prone to infections? No. So we're talking about going from that level of care to nothing. And that was a 7-year-old child. And what I can tell you, she has since been moved, but other children who are in that condition will die because we have removed any opportunity for them to get care, whether it is when they are at these third-party locations or here in the United States.
I want to give Kate a lot of credit. Her advocacy and the advocacy of Task Force Nix and others did a lot to help get that little girl out of there. I'll also give a lot of credit to our government partners. For 2 years, that little girl's photo was up in every care office, every single care office all over the place, because so many people were working really hard to get her out. And so I want your listeners to know that, like, my experience over the past couple of years is until now, I had never run into anybody who was apathetic or didn't want to help. People were working really hard within the confines of this really fucked up system. And whereas for a long time, the system was, people were working within the system to try to find the fastest path to success for these vulnerable people. Now, it seems an awful lot like people are working to try to figure out ways to throw down roadblocks in the system. So that's why I've been so aggressive about telling people that if you were talking about it in August of 2021 and you're still in this, you can simultaneously be in the room saying, hey, this needs to happen, and making a good case. And you shouldn't be in that room if you're not taking input from everybody to understand the whole problem. Don't be selfish and just take care of your guys, right? You gotta, like, we have an obligation to this entire ecosystem of people that, you know, even if you don't like somebody, everybody has something to offer here. Everybody has something of value. And there's nobody, not me, not Kate, not anybody, who knows this entire system like the back of their hand, right? So I'm looking at you, any one of you that was up on TV, that was clamoring, that was yelling about how fucked up Joe Biden was for the last 3 years. We agree. We need to make sure that we're holding everybody to the same account, because Afghans need to see us fighting. So I hope that we're going to see some voices getting a little bit louder. At this point, we still believe it was an unintended oversight, but now we're starting to believe that people don't care enough to fix it.
Well, and I know you've been talking to people, Shawn, on the Hill about it. What are you hearing from them? I mean, are they at least
I'm not going to give
that...
up names, but I'll tell you, there's some MAGA members that are really interested in fixing this. Like, they're putting together briefings. I'm flying to, I just got back from Austin. I'm home for 24 hours. Tonight I get on a red eye to go to D.C. I'm going to be there for 2 days. And then I'm going to fly back.
There's some
I believe
attention.
that people are trying to do something. The reality is, I am a politically inclined person. Afghan EVAC is not a political organization. Our constituency is only Afghans, right? We help Afghans, we help advocates. We don't care what jersey you're wearing. I don't give a shit. Like, if you spend all your time talking shit about me behind my back, but you're trying to help Afghans, great. We'll help you, friend.
I do it to your face.
Yeah, at least Kate says it to my face. Don't be a baby.
Yeah, guys, be brave.
So, but there's so many people that are interested in doing this. Democrats don't matter right now, not even a little bit. So if you know a Republican member of Congress that needs a briefing, and you want to call me, we'll help. We'll put it all together. When I say I don't care what kind of jersey you wear, I mean we'll do whatever. If you care about Afghans.
That's all we need.
Let's get to work, man.
Yeah. And I think, too, one of the hard things, especially when you're dealing with politics and immigration, is it's not just drumming up support, but it's the people who are willing to really do the work. Because this is a slow process. And, take it from a lawyer. I'm watching all of these changes over the last 2 weeks, and I'm thinking this is really, a lot of this is going to come down to the courtroom. And I see a lot of lawyers who are really gearing up to take on that fight. But the law is not a fast process, right? It's a diligent one. And so when we're talking about these needs that Afghans and other immigrant communities have, it's exigent, right? It's exigent circumstances. So it's great that we're seeing some people who are starting to really put their name on this issue. I did see a letter that had come out from a couple of high-level reps, including Jamie Raskin, and I was delighted to see that, right? Please put your name on this, but also know that we cannot just pursue this via traditional methods. We need to advocate very strongly for somebody to come in and say, this is an emergency, and so here's what our options really are. And I think that's what's frustrating for people.
It is. It is an emergency. And while we can't just wait around, right? We have to take action. We have to do stuff. But what I would encourage everybody to do is, as you're taking action, you need to think about the second and third order effects, because there's no wiggle room right now. There's no forgiveness. We're hearing that this week or end of next week, the U4U and the OAW parole is supposed to be rescinded. Now, we haven't seen that happen yet, but that's really scary, right? And so our friends are going to need a lot of help, and there's no, if we make a mistake, then it could impact them for the rest of their lives. It could impact generations of their family. So it's so important that you're not giving immigration advice. Buddy up with an immigration attorney. And if you can't, it's not good to kick in a door and just deposit an Afghan somewhere, right? These are human lives of our allies who stood with us for 20 years and have been waiting for 3.5 years, placing their trust in us and placing their trust in our government. And so we have to be really, really diligent, like the law, even as we are acting under exigent circumstances, because things are happening out. They're just doing stuff. And, there's a lot of lawsuits coming that are meant to pause this. We hope that people will start fucking filing them. You
hear that, lawyers?
It's been a couple weeks now, friends. What are we doing? So... Yeah, as you can tell, I'm passionate, I'm irritated, I'm tired, I'm cranky, because it often feels like people really care about this until one of their friends is in a seat, right? And I have a position where I can stand and say that when my friends were in the seats, I was beating the shit out of them. And
as friends do.
Yeah. It's okay to hit your friends every once in a while. Don't tell my kids that.
But I think that's a really great segue into my favorite topic, which is also the mental health implications of what's been going on. And Beth, I know that Shawn and I have sort of been taking this conversation from you. Do you mind if I share
I don't
about a
mind at
case?
all. You guys are here. And then there's one question I want to ask you as a follow-up about something you just posted today that's really important to remember now too. And then we have questions from Afghans. So that's my only request is we have
we got
Shawn
22 minutes.
for 22 minutes. So we've got to get all those 3 things in. Go, Kate, go.
I can do this.
I know you can.
I will offer a warning that the story I'm about to tell is meant to demonstrate how important, it is for these immigration changes to really be looked at, but it is going to involve some difficult stories for people, including about sexual assault and suicide. So if you are one of the people who is struggling right now and this is not a topic that you want to listen to, please feel free to tune me out. It happens all the time. But I do want to share. A couple of months ago, a case was put in front of me with a 25-year-old Afghan woman, and she is the sister of a man who had served with the Afghan military and who spoke very openly against the Taliban. So that individual, that male, has since been moved to the United States under the SIV process, for which I am very grateful. However, that's not always enough for the Taliban. So what they did is they kidnapped this woman and they raped her overnight in front of her husband and her infant child, and they forced the brother to listen over the phone. So in the weeks that followed, after she woke up from that incident, her husband had taken the child and left because to be a sexual assault victim in Afghanistan has massive social implications. She tried to commit suicide 3 times. We were able to get her into a hospital program. She was taken from the hospital. Then she was kept in Taliban custody for 10 weeks, where she was sexually assaulted every day and every night. So she is 25. We have since gotten her back in our possession. She's in a safe house, but she will never be able to have children again. She will never see her child again. Her family has disowned her. And every pathway that this victim had, whether to the United States or somewhere else, is closed now to her. She has no option to come and join the only family that she has. And so we are stuck. We are stuck with a woman who is exhibiting extreme physical and mental distress, understandably. And we have to say to her, we need to leave you where you are because no one will bring you here. This is, as a lawyer speaking, one of the most clear-cut cases for humanitarian parole that I have ever seen in my life, right? Like this woman, the physical injuries alone, her reproductive organs have prolapsed. She will never recover from this. And every time we speak to her, the conversation is the same. She does not think that she can make it through the next hour. Certainly not the next day, the next week, the next month. And so when we talk about bringing people over here, everybody has a really good reason for wanting to come to the United States for safety, whether they served with our military or they're being hunted like this woman. But we have eliminated any pathway for victims to go to a place of safety. And we have to repeatedly tell her this every day. So when we talk about the mental health implications, it's not just for these victims, but think about how it feels for the case managers, right? So we talk about moral injury all the time. And the Afghanistan withdrawal is one of the best examples I can think of for people if they want to understand what moral injury is. But the case managers have already experienced one round of trauma during the withdrawal and all of the work that had to come after that. So when we talk about moral injury, it is happening again. People are being re-traumatized, right? It's not I'm exposed to moral injury once and then it stays with me and I can deal with it. That's not what's happening. All of these case managers who have somehow managed to dig inside their souls and stay in this work for 3.5 years are looking at what is happening to their allies who they have just been hoping for and working their asses off for, only to be told by this administration, we really do not care. And so there is a mental health absolute crisis going through both the immigrant community and also case managers.
I would like to offer one point, a contrarian point that also actually illustrates your point.
Please.
Her brother could get citizenship and then sponsor her for an F4 sibling visa, correct?
Yes.
Just so people know, it's a 5-year wait for citizenship from LPR status, correct, Kate? And then from there, The F4 visa wait time at last check from me was 17 years, I want to say. So, roughly double her age, she could just wait in limbo, in fear, in a torturous position. So there is that option, in case anyone is wondering.
I think the reason it feels like that's not an option, though, is because when we look at how even just budgeting, like they have taken so much of that option away that like you can submit the visa request, you can submit your documentation, but the odds that there is somebody sitting at a desk who is able to process it right now is very slim.
Yeah, well, and there's a reason it's a 17-year wait, is there's so many people who want to do this. And think about it, if we're going to cut immigration from other means, people are going to seek that even more, which means that wait time is only going to escalate, because if you're not going to, anyway, I don't mean it as a legitimate other option. That is not another option.
No, but it is. Like, that's what people are having to consider.
Yeah, and it's just horrid. I can't imagine. That case breaks my heart, and I'm so sorry for her. That's just unconscionable. And I want people to understand that too. Like, that is not an abnormal thing for a woman in Afghanistan who has pissed off the Taliban to go through. Talk to Leslie Merriman. She deals with these cases every day of her life, and I don't know how she continues to do it. So this is why this is important too. And I'm glad you brought it up, because the Taliban are inhumane and
I just want to put
abhorrent.
a face on it, you know? Put the face of a 25-year-old rape victim or a 7-year-old medically sensitive child. Like, this is not about policy. This is about human nature and human decency.
Yep. When you told the story about the young girl, I thought about another girl that, the Biden administration never helped her out. I think Portugal took her in. Do you guys remember the baby? She had been an infant in a maternity ward, and the Taliban had come in spraying gunfire during the 20 years that we were in the country. Her mother was killed. Many other people were killed, but this little baby somehow was saved with a ton of blood transfusions. She required a serious amount of physical therapy just to be able to exist. And when the country fell, she couldn't get access to that anymore because her father was a member of, I believe, the ANP, the Afghan National Police, and he couldn't leave his home. And she was dying, and nobody could get her out. And there are just, there are so many stories like this that people just don't hear. And this is not an easy topic. When I tell people I have a podcast, I'm like, you probably don't want to listen because it is so depressing. It is. It's so depressing, but
I'll take the blame for that. That one's on me.
Now I'm like, no, it's time. We all need to listen. A lot of Americans got to escape the tragedy that took place in Afghanistan for 20 years and now for the next 3.5. And it's time for us to all face up to it, because it's on us. It's on our country, and it's continuing. So that being said, Kate, I want to ask a follow-up because it kind of relates to the story you're telling now. Pakistan now is saying that they're going to deport Afghans involved in our refugee processing program if it doesn't speed up, which is fucking bullshit. First, one thing, because Shawn, I remember when you told me Pakistan had been holding up U.S. RAP processing, right? And now they're telling us that they're going to start sending those people back. So anybody who is safe in Pakistan or relatively safe in Pakistan, now what is going on, Kate?
Oh, I mean, it's exactly what you're also seeing in Afghanistan. It's horrific. Like, these people who are in Pakistan because we told them that was a safer option, they are now being rounded up in like these massive police riots at some point. And they're deporting people back. And that's not only unsafe because, hey, we're sending people back to Afghanistan in massive numbers, right? Like, I don't know the actual number, Shawn. You might have a better idea of how many people have already been sent back, but it is astronomical. But you have to also know that now the Taliban knows that this is happening, and so they are, again, sitting on those border points of entry and exit, and they are checking the documentation of everybody comes. And so if you have been flagged for any reason, if you had a remote family member who served with the military 18 years ago, or if they know that you were a sex assault victim from the Taliban who somehow got out of their grasp before they wanted you to, they are going to put you in a facility, in a detention facility under the Taliban purview. You are going to be tortured. You are going to be sexually assaulted. So it is such an inhumane practice, and it is one that I wish we had been better prepared for, because I do think that Pakistan gave us a couple of signals over the past 3.5 years that said, like, we are not prepared to take on this sort of immigrant community. But it is becoming, in my estimation, a much more violent process of removal.
Yeah, it looks that way from what I see in the pictures that get sent to me.
Yeah, look, Pakistan was really difficult to get them to let an RSC operate there.
Yeah.
Afghan evac wrote a letter. We sent it to the Pakistani leaders. We heard that they were upset with us, and I said, "Good, I'm fucking upset with you too." And but I got to give credit to our diplomats who went in there, printed out the names of printed out the names, not the locations of every single Afghan that was there, and dropped it on the table like a thump.
Yep.
And that's what ended up getting the RSC open. And they were cranking along. They made an agreement that within 18 months they would process the 25,000 refugees that were there.
Damn.
And they got through most of them. They got through processing most of them. Most of them were still waiting
Still
to come
there.
here.
Yeah.
Like 10 to 15,000 still waiting to come here. And things were cranking along. But these executive orders stopped that, right? Pakistan, like the uncertainty that comes from these things, Pakistan is acting monstrous towards Afghans. And also I understand them being like, what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Right.
Right? So these half-baked executive orders where they didn't think through the unintended consequences, what we need to see President Trump and the State Department doing, with Secretary Rubio, is giving assurance to Pakistan saying, no, we're still going to get these folks out. But right now, they essentially said, they're good there. Hang out. So,
They're not.
They're not. No, they're not. It's really ugly. So, I know we need to move on, but, that's I'm doing a thread on Pakistan here pretty soon. I did one on women and girls right before we got on the call. We're going to do an explainer on Pakistan and how all that has gone down.
I do just want to give credit really quickly, Beth, that we have also seen some Afghan women and children who are starting to organize because they have heard what is happening in Pakistan, and they have been hosting these really powerful, peaceful protests that are essentially saying, like, you cannot send us back because, like, we will die if we are sent back. But I think that they are doing a really wonderful job at advocating for themselves when they shouldn't have to, and I just want to give them a shout out because nobody is stronger than an Afghan woman.
Oh, totally agreed. Hardship has been a transformative thing for
It's in their
Afghan women. By
DNA.
this point, they're like diamonds.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to do rapid fire questions, Shawn, and you are going to show us exactly why you are who you are. All right, my SIV case is approved and in the interview stage. Can I self-relocate and purchase my own tickets and travel to the U.S. where a close friend of mine is, if I can cover my own expenses?
You absolutely can. Yes, do it so long as you have the ability to get resettled here and you have a safety net here, because it's going to be hard. The American dream is hard to achieve.
Absolutely. Does it impact I-730 refugee asylee relative petition visa interviews? The applicant is traveling by himself to a third country, not requesting care travel support for a visa interview. The case has been transferred to the said country, but the interview date hasn't been scheduled yet.
It does not. I-730 for asylees, still moving. I-730s, SIVs, IVs, still moving. The support services for SIVs have stopped SIVs from flowing out on care flights, but I-730s are good to go.
Cool. I have an American SIV. Can I go to the USA for personal consumption?
Yes.
Okay. A family member in Tajikistan, along with their family, received their SIVs in November of 2024. Per IOM requirements, they submitted their Tajik government documents and their flight is confirmed. It was confirmed for February of 25, but it got canceled. Can they fly to the U.S. by themselves?
Yes, they can. Again,
Okay.
make sure they have the support services they need here.
Yeah. After waiting for more than 4 years, our SIV case was recently transferred to Qatar by the CARE/NVC team. Does the new executive order mean that our case is going to be stuck and there won't be any progress?
Until there is a waiver, cases are not going to be going. If it's a refugee case, then there's just no movement at all. If it's an SIV case, they can complete all the processing on their own.
Right. But if they can't afford it, then they are, for all intents and
Unfortunately,
purposes,
yeah.
not going to be able to. Right. Will processing continue for P1s who are newly referred? My wife and
Yeah.
child in Afghanistan just got noticed. Yeah.
Any P1, P2, P3, P4, any refugees, it's all stopped. There are no
Yeah.
exceptions. There's a case-by-case waiver which hasn't been promulgated yet, and I wouldn't expect that people are going to get through it.
Madam, my case review took 2 years when my boss confirmed all my papers. Will I get COM approval?
That's a case-by-case basis. We have no idea what's in your case, but COM processing will happen, so you will get a decision.
Dear, please ask about P1, P2 cases and indicate this one that those who passed all the processes and were waiting for evacuations, should they be hopeful that they will be evacuated after 3 months?
I think you should be hopeful that you will eventually get evacuated. It probably won't be for a while. We'll know more. I mean, they could just issue a waiver, right? But and Marco Rubio could open up foreign aid, but that doesn't impact refugees. You need Secretary Noem and Secretary Rubio together to approve an exemption, or President Trump to approve an exemption for U.S. rep cases to move. Until then, we have to, if that doesn't happen, then we have to hope that eventually U.S. rep will reopen under this administration, or the next time there's another administration, that they prioritize this. But I want to be very clear. Getting something started after 4 years is going to be really, really hard. So if this administration doesn't keep it going, there may not be a lot of hope, and people should just move on with their lives, because I don't like the limbo is what, move on with your lives, and then if it opens up again, then great.
Yeah, limbo is a tough place to live. This is not a question, but it is a question, and so you guys don't have to answer it, but I want to put it out there because this is the kind of thing that I get all the time from Afghans, right? I improved myself in cybersecurity area. Kindly provide a way for me finding jobs in IT or cybersecurity remotely. Or please find a scholarship for me and a master's degree in cybersecurity or IT. Now, I want to make it very clear. I am barely getting by doing all the things that I have to do right now. I just don't have the capacity to help people find jobs. I am constantly trying to source people who can give jobs to Afghans, right? Like Afghan Hire was working for a while. There are all the UN organizations working. But I just want to make it clear that is a constant request that I get from Afghans who can't work right now and can't have the money to not starve or be homeless inside wherever they are living. So there are so many issues. Oh yes, please.
One, this is why we need the resettlement agencies, and they exist to help figure that out. Mm-hmm. For Afghans listening, the volunteers that are out there working, most of us are trying to make sure that the relocation pipeline is moving, and the traditional NGOs that can provide those services are able to provide those services. Also, you have the internet. Absolutely use ChatGPT, use Google, use LinkedIn. Get out there and find these things on your own. You can, I know that there's a lot of different communities that can help you navigate it, but one of the things that this administration is going to want to see is people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. So I would say, get on Google, check it out. I know that there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry, but these folks aren't going to be better than you at finding the things that fit for you.
I think, can I just reiterate one thing that Shawn is pointing out? Because with these questions, people are really stopping their inquiry at can we get to the U.S.? If we're an SIV, can we get ourselves to the U.S.? And I think what we are trying to communicate is yes, but please know that once you have 2 feet on the ground here, there is no mechanism of support that exists right now. So you need to plan for that. And I think that's been really hard for some of the volunteers is, we can get people here and then what? Because then we're responsible for helping them get their first meal, get a hotel, find their rent, enroll in school. So there are both the short and long-term considerations. And right now you can get yourself here. And I applaud you if you do. Please be prepared to further support yourself, because right now, all of the mechanisms that the volunteers used to rely on, not only Afghans, but the volunteers, they are gone.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the young woman that you and I both know, Kate, in HP, who is so well educated, speaks English beautifully, and cannot get a job because she doesn't have an RMP group to help her because she has HP. Yes. Anyway, that we could go on for forever. I know that Shawn, you have a really important thing to be doing. Kate, you have important things always to be doing too.
Not more important than this, Beth.
I have things. I don't know, but I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time, updating everyone, and for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
And to everyone, Tasha Kaur as always, and hope to see you again soon. Send me all of your questions if you still have them.